In Big Pool, Maryland, at the Fort Frederick State Park, there is possibly the finest restored French and Indian War era fort in all of America. This was the only stone fort built by the British, and it's been lovingly restored. It's quite beautiful, and it forms the centerpiece for the Fort Frederick 18th Century Market Fair event. And during that event, it's manned by the people of Joshua Beals' company, a recreated unit of Maryland Provincial forces during the French and Indian War. And I thought it'd be interesting, while I was at Market Fair, to take a look at the fort itself and learn a little bit about it and about the people who manned it. I'm here at Fort Frederick with Jacob Davis, and he's one of the professional historical interpreters here at the fort. And one of the questions I have for him, and I've been talking about this with a number of the military guys I camp with, is why here? Why did they build the fort in this location? So why did they?
So Fort Frederick is built in this particular location because a half mile from this bastion here and the northeast bastion in the back, there is a big bend in the Potomac River. That bend in the Potomac River allows, with the fort being here, allows the fort to have command of this area of the Potomac River. We know that in 1755, Governor Horatio Sharp purchases 4 naval cannons off of a ship in Annapolis. So with those 4 naval cannons, they have about a half-mile radius for their effectiveness. So putting them in the bastions allows for effective command of this large bend in the Potomac River.
Well, on this aerial shot of the fort, you can see those projecting arrowheads. Those are the bastions that Jacob was telling us about. And the 2 that are circled in red, that's where the cannon would have been placed to command the Potomac River. I'm here with Matthew and Tim. They are a couple of the professional interpreters here at Fort Frederick. And tell me about the fort. When was it built, and how big is it? How is it manned?
Sure. All right, well, construction begins June of 1756. Governor Horatio Sharp of Maryland commissions a strong stone fort on the western frontier to deter raids coming from Fort Duquesne. The fort's unique. It is the only stone fort built by the British colonies. We are missing certain aspects of it today. The bastions are projected from the square. They should be filled with earth and wood. There was 4 6-pound cannons here, a garrison of 200 Maryland regulars. So the potential to have a cannon and 50 men on each corner would of course deter Indian raids. There are no attacks made on the fort, though there are people scalped a mile away. The fort's second role, as well as being a deterrent, is to be a supply base. The Maryland regulars from Fort Frederick are going on campaign elsewhere. They're fighting small bands of Indians in the woods, and by patrolling from this fort to other forts, they're reducing the Indian presence in the area. Want to talk about the buildings and the size?
So we have 2 enlistments barracks reconstructed here. Each one should hold about 100 men, the size of a Maryland company during the French and Indian War. And then behind our flagpole should be a 3rd building called the Governor's House. That's your officers' quarters, the storehouse, and the armory, we believe, where it was in there. It's also where 1757 delegation of Cherokee came north to the fort from the Carolinas and worked out an alliance with Maryland. The Cherokee will teach the Marylanders how to fight in the Indian fashion. The Marylanders will give the natives trade goods to help pull that alliance in. Inside the fort, it's fairly large. It's about 1.5 acres. Pretty large for a frontier fort at the time. And as Matt was saying, it's built of stone. Typical frontiers of fort are built of wood.
Well, I'm here in the officers' quarters of Fort Frederick, and it's really set up for the engineer, the chief engineering officer, and you can see the maps, you can see the tables, the equipment. And today we're going to meet some of the officers manning the fort here and learn their roles. So we'll start off with Tom Curling, who is the lieutenant, and why don't you tell us what the forces were doing here and what your role would have been here in the fort.
Basically, our unit is a provincial unit. I am the lieutenant, the officer on detail here at the fort. The Maryland Forces, Joshua Beals' company, We would be garrisoning the fort in the 1750s. Basically, our role was to patrol from here to Fort Cumberland and make sure there was no threats to the king and crown in this area. Most of our duties would have been basically your routine everyday maintaining the fort, getting meals prepared, wood detail, water detail, all sorts of things just to maintain the integrity of the fort. There would have been approximately 200 men garrisoned here. My role specifically would have been to relay the orders and keep everything running smoothly. As you can see, my uniform that I'm wearing today, this is my garrison uniform. It's a lot nicer uniform that I'm wearing if I would be on campaign or in the field with my men. I would be wearing my other uniform, which basically looks exactly the same as an enlisted man uniform, except for the gorget and the sash. A lot of responsibility, but you know, the Maryland forces were one of the key players in Fort Frederick and Governor Sharp's plan to bring this fort up and running at that point.
All right, Frank Spertel is another lieutenant here with the forces. And Frank, tell us what your role was.
Sure, I'm on detached service from Joshua Beals' company. You just heard from Lieutenant Tom Curling, and I'm on detached service with Captain Lieutenant Robert Nipar, who's our engineer here in the fort. And so one of my duties is to make sure that the engineers, when they're out surveying roads and making bridges and things like that around the fort, is protected from any sort of hostile force that may attack the work party. I also serve as a kind of aide de camp when I'm in headquarters here, and make sure that the administrative functions of the fort are running in the way they should be, that supplies are coming and going, that orders are being posted, that people basically know what they need to be doing when they're in garrison in the fort. The uniform that I have on now is a Provincial Maryland uniform, and it's the kind of uniform that officers would have worn in the field, like you just heard from Lieutenant Curling. So it's not a garrison uniform like Lieutenant Curling was wearing, but something more akin to what the enlisted men would wear. And this is a uniform that I would wear in the field, and I'm dressed to go in the field with the engineer.
And now we're talking to Robert Nipar, who's a captain lieutenant in the Engineering Ordinary, and he is a regular British officer as opposed to a Provincial Maryland officer. So tell us what your role was here on the frontier.
As a British officer, Governor Sharp had requested an engineer to come down and assist him in the design and layout of the fort, which I was sent and provided. I was attached to the Royal American Regiment that was created in the colonies. You could tell that I was an engineer by the black facing, and also the uniform void of any additional materials or insignia. We did the layout of the fort, we did the design, we later on laid out the road for that connected Fort Frederick and Fort Cumberland. There were some bridges that were built. We would have helped with the placement of the barracks and the design of the governor's house.
Well, I'm here with Jim Rogers. He's the company's drummer. And Jim, why don't you tell us about your role here in the company and what the role of music was in general to 18th century forces?
Yes, drummers and fifers were a very integral part of a military unit in the 18th century. Drummers and fifers served the role of communications in the company. You can imagine a large battle with lots of muskets and artillery going off. It would be very difficult to hear human voices over that. So the drum and the fife were much louder instruments that could carry that information across the battlefield. Muskets, because you're expecting enemy contact. The next call would be make ready, and then The call that comes next would be present, which is when they bring their muskets physically down to point in the general direction of the enemy. So present, and then fire, and then they go back to prime and load.
This is Josh Faust. Josh portrays a private here in the Maryland Forces. And Josh, why don't you tell us what your role was here at the fort?
Right, so the private's duty was to, first and foremost, listen to your officers, but to garrison the fort and to patrol the area along the Conococheague between here and Fort Cumberland. They were detached out to their reports of Indian activity, and most of the time the privates were on garrison duty. The lieutenant told you there are about 200 privates here at the fort capacity. That number changed depending on the year and the campaign, but the privates were the professional soldiers of the colony of Maryland. They were provincials, but they weren't militia. These were guys who were trained in the art of war at the time.
So as a private here in the provincial forces, what would you be carrying?
So everything I'm carrying, I'd be pretty self-sufficient for a few days. I've got my bedroll, which would be my bed and my blanket. I may have an extra shirt or some socks rolled in there. I've got my cartridge box, my belly box, canteen, bayonet, and a shot bag for gun maintenance. I'm pretty sufficient for a few days with this. If I'm going on an extended campaign, like the Forbes expedition, which the Maryland Forces went on, I'd also be having a haversack, which I could put my personal items, some food stores, those sorts of things in it. But everything that I'm wearing right now would be pretty much what the average private would have on.
Now, when you were in the field, how many rounds of ammunition would you be carrying? How many cartridges?
That's a great question. It really depended. Later on, the Maryland Forces transitioned to more of an Indian style. They dropped this sort of British outfit, uniformed outfit, and they would be carrying powder horns and a cartridge box. Right now, I don't have any rounds in here, but this is a 18-round cartridge box. That would probably be what I would carry in the cartridge box at any given time. We didn't usually carry multiple cartridge boxes. That wasn't the sort of preferred style of the command at that time.
Apparently the closet shrunk my clothes. I just found
Beautiful. This, of course, is a typical barracks room the men would have lived in while manning the fort.
jacket's not too long. The jacket's
See the bunks, dining tables.
This is the south bastion of Fort Frederick. When the fort was actually in operation, this would have been filled with earth to make an earthen ramp. And at the top of that ramp would have been one of the 6-pound cannons. Each bastion would have been defended by a 6-pound cannon. The point of these bastions is to provide an enfilading fire, so if you're attacking the wall at any point, you're going to be able to be shot at by two sides from each bastion.
And this bastion would have commanded that bend on the Potomac River, right?
That's correct. So one of the reasons the fort was constructed was the bend in the river. So this would have been one of the more important bastions facing the actual river. This bastion here and that bastion over there actually command the river.
We're going to watch Joshua Beals' company raising the Maryland provincial colors on the flagpole.
Company, take care! Take care! To the front! To the front! March! Flag detail, ground yours, fire left. Flag detail, 6 paces to front, march. Fast company, order your, rest on yours, fire left. Flag detail, flag. Withdraw yours, bayonet. Fix yours, bayonet. Shoulder yours, bayonet. Colors. Present your bayonet. Shoulder your bayonet. Light detail. Shoot right about face. 6 paces in front. Mark. Light detail. Shoot right about face. Light detail. Cover the fire on. Bells Company, rest on your firelights. Unfix your bayonets. Return your bayonets. At your ease.
I'd like to thank the reenactors of Joshua Beals Company and the personnel of the paid interpretive staff of Fort Frederick for helping me make this video. I appreciated all the help, and I hope you all enjoyed it very much as well.